Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook for Leaders and Entrepreneurs. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Paul Stafford to the show. Paul has over 2 decades of experience as an adult educational professional and an agile thinking advocate. He is the visionary behind innovative projects like EDAP program at Durham University, which helps postgraduate researchers to develop agile thinking and entrepreneurial skills. He has also designed and delivered a project called PCCIP, which stands for Pop Culture and Communicating Creativity and Innovation Perspective Projects, which uses famous franchises like Doctor Who, Harry Potter, and Game of Thrones to teach entrepreneurial and design thinking. Paul's passion for fostering creativity and entrepreneurship is amazing and inspiring for me. And Paul, I cannot wait to dive into your journey and insights. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your creative playbook of success with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the lovely introduction as well. I hardly recognize myself in that introduction. Thank you.
To Paul, definitely. And let's start with the icebreaker question today. So, what is your favorite movie?
Oh, right. Well, obviously, like most people, I have a lot of favorite movies, but the one that I keep going back to, that I will at a low point I will go and watch to sort of give myself a boost again, is an old movie from the 40s called A Matter of Life and Death. And not many people have heard of it. It's a Powell and Pressburger movie. It flips between black and white and color.
Yeah.
It's a propaganda movie. It's got David Niven in it, and David Niven, who's a famous actor from the 40s and 50s and 60s. Um, uh, he is an airline pilot whose plane's been shot up, and he
Mhm.
thinks he's going to crash, and doesn't think he's going to survive, and he ends up talking to an air traffic controller, and he thinks that she's the last person he's going to speak to, and then surprisingly he does survive, and they meet, but then he keeps getting visited by heavenly messengers who say, "You should have died. You should come with us. You should have died." And he then fights for his position to stay on the earth because he's met this girl and he's fallen in love with her. So the story is very nice, but the imagery of heaven and the court case is just spectacular, particularly for the era in which it was made. And no matter how many times I watch it, it still speaks to me.
Amazing, Paul. I'm definitely going to add it to my watch list as well
You
for sure.
should.
So, Paul, could you give us more insights into your previous work experience and personal life so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more?
Certainly. Uh, well, when I think about the setting I'm in now, entrepreneurship and startup is in my DNA, in my soul.
Love
My
that.
I come from two generations of my family who had their own business. My grandfather set up a fresh fish business in the 30s, which then pivoted into fresh fish and fish and chips, and eventually my parents took the business over, and they ran the business until the late 80s. So my first job was in the fish shop,
Mhm.
helping to clean the shop and helping to go and collect the fish from the fish market and all that sort of thing. So I lived the own business experience.
Mhm.
But it isn't a business I particularly wanted to go into, but the business had been sold by the time I was looking for work. And I spent a lot of years in middle management in retail, working in a huge variety of retail settings. And I would build my own training program. And then from there, I morphed into further education, where I taught in a further education college for around 20 years. I was teaching IT, and going into a variety of workplaces and seeing what it was like behind the scenes and
Mhm.
helping their staff to improve. And that morphed into supporting unemployed people back into work. And often the businesses that I was helping the unemployed people get into were startups or new businesses themselves. So I would build um, tailored training programs for startups and other businesses so that staff members could then undertake these and be the best they could and hit the ground running. So imagine you'd been a cleaner all of your life, and you'd love to have a job in a shop, but every time you went for an interview, you never got it because you couldn't answer the questions of what related to working in a shop. I would create a training session for these people so that when they went for a job in their next environment, they knew the language and could and what the role entailed. And of course, when I did these training programs for startups and business and other businesses, they
Hmm.
were amazed at the quality of the unemployed people because they knew the environment. And then from there, I went to Newcastle University, where I was the bridge between um, humanities and social sciences PhD students. And then a vacancy came up at Durham University in the Venture Lab, working with the PhD students, and I applied for that, and I've been there ever since.
Amazing. And that's where we met as well, at the
It
Durham
is,
Venture Lab.
yeah, yeah.
And, and what inspired you to get into entrepreneurship? Is it like you were, since it was in your DNA, you were uh, diverted toward that lane, or
That's a good question. Yes, it is in my DNA, and but I've only recently realised that my mindset is entrepreneurial. That's a fairly new realization for me. For many years, I thought creative meant artistic, and it doesn't. Creative means entrepreneurial mindset, the using the resources that are available to you.
Mhm,
And I was exposed via my family business, but also supporting the unemployed people into work roles and within the Newcastle University role. The power of helping people achieve their own dreams and using my creativity to
mhm.
help them on their journey is what sort of speaks to me.
Amazing. And give me an example of what is a entrepreneurial mindset, because there's loads of information online. So I want to know, what's your take on this one?
Okay, the entrepreneurial mindset is, well, I think I can paraphrase it as sometimes if you're trying to undertake a project and you have a wealth of money to be able to realize that project, that
Hmm.
can remove the entrepreneurial aspect to it, because you can just buy whatever you need in order to realize the project. Whereas if you are in a position where money is tight or scarce, then it helps you to focus on what's important. It helps you to reimagine your process, reimagine what is important to you, and utilize the resources that you've got in a different way to achieve your end goals. And
Hmm.
and without realizing, that's exactly what I was doing in the retail setting. That's exactly what we did in our own business setting. That's exactly what I did when I was creating training sessions because the budgets were tight. And so how do I make a program that is meaningful and interesting
Hmm.
to the people I'm trying to help, while also not having any money to do that? Well, you leverage your network. You look at the resources that you've got. You go and
Mm.
find things that are out there for free to you to reimagine and reutilize. All of this is an entrepreneurial mindset. So it's entrepreneurial in that way rather
Hmm.
than being an entrepreneur.
Nice. And if you don't mind, could you share an example of how you applied your entrepreneurial mindset in the retail space, as you mentioned?
Yeah. Okay. Right. At one point, I was in charge of a teddy bear shop. Would you believe?
Okay.
And there was six of them throughout the UK, and my brief was to try and make it the go-to environment for this range of teddy bears. They were called Forever Friends. They're
Hmm.
possibly died a little bit now. To make the environment um, for those people who loved that brand, a sort of a Disney shop for Forever Friends. But I had no budget. I had nothing to do that with. And so I I found a teddy bear collector's magazine. I it's old school, so I wrote to them and said what we were trying to do within the teddy bear
Mm-hmm.
shop that I was the area manager for. Um, the Teddy Bear magazine were intrigued by this and came out and interviewed me and took photographs, all for free. And we had a two-page spread in the magazine. And the icing on the cake was it's an international magazine.
Mm.
And before the advent of online purchasing, I started to get letters from people in Australia asking if they could buy something from our shops and arrange for it to be sent to Australia. And that all of that was for nothing. So all of that marketing, all of that reach, all of that accessing a new environment
Mm.
was done for free.
It's amazing. And yeah, that's crazy. And it shows as an entrepreneur, if it doesn't matter if you're under budget or over budget, like what we have, the resources which you utilize to the fullest. So that's a good example of that. And since your work in the Durham Venture Lab, could you possibly share an inspiring student entrepreneurial story that you can think of?
Yes, but obviously there's so many to choose from, and that's the difficulty. Um, so uh, I think I'll start with one that I'm working with now, um, who's a guy who has come up with a new insect repellent. And although that doesn't sound particularly inspirational in itself, what is inspirational is this isn't his environment or discipline at all. And he has taught himself the chemistry and entomology around this insect repellent to the point where he can talk confidently to expert academics in entomology and chemistry, to the point that they understand what he's trying to achieve and get them on board. And his goal is to change the world and really help people who suffer from insect issues in other
Hmm.
countries. So that's inspirational. Obviously, there's the headline acts like Low Carbon Materials, who took part in the Earthshot Prize, who come from our stable and had support from us.
Hmm.
But equally, I don't want to say at the other end of the scale, but it's equally inspirational when we have a student who loved mountain climbing, was an award-winning mountain climber, and she set herself up as a mountain climbing training consultant, I suppose.
Hmm.
So he has used her knowledge and her love to carve out a job, a business for herself that speaks to her heart. And I'll end with um, uh, the inspiration that I got from a student
Hmm.
whose idea was selling clothes online, um, and how he leveraged Instagram in order to create a brand and really make
Hmm.
an impact. And he said, at one of the success points that he'd had and the discussion that we had, that in the very first conversation he had with me, he was amazed that I didn't laugh, and the inspiration comes
Laugh
from
at his
the
idea, you mean?
yes,
Okay.
he because he was nervous about coming to me with his idea.
Mm.
And what's inspirational about that is um, he was obviously concerned about sharing his idea, and pushed through that to the point where he reached out to talk to it and start that journey. And that's equally inspirational.
Yeah, he took that leap of faith and coming to you and sharing that. So that's definitely
Exactly that.
huge. Love that. And what's the most important lessons you have learned from your time working in the Durham Venture Lab that you could share with aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think uh, it's that the strength that we can give to our student entrepreneurs and graduate entrepreneurs, because the offer is open once you've graduated as well, um, in helping people have the belief and the confidence in their own idea. As I said, they come to us with their little green shoot or a little baby to show to us, um,
Mm.
and it's recognizing that they may appear confident, but you can easily destroy somebody's first steps into being entrepreneurial. Um, and then as we give them the tools and the thought process to build their understanding, they also build their confidence and their belief. And then when they're talking to potential grant
Mhm.
providers, or they're going in for a competition that has a grant fund at the end, their
Mhm.
confidence comes through because we'll help them to build their understanding so they are the strongest they can be at that point. And I think that's the one of the really important things that we
Mhm.
do in our role.
And so, Paul, what about those entrepreneurs who don't have access to the venture lab that they can come up to you and ask and get your feedback on? And maybe they have an idea, they go to their parents or they go to their friends where they're getting pushed back on the idea. So how can they build that belief and confidence to keep moving forward with
That's a
whatever
great,
idea they have?
that's a great question. Um, Parents and friends are great to have on board, um, but they can also be dangerous. Um, because they will tell you that it's an absolutely amazing idea, and yes, they believe in you wholeheartedly because they love you and they don't want to destroy your dream. But equally, as you say, they will say something like, "Well, that's a silly idea. What on earth are you doing that for? You should get a proper job," or whatever it may be. So, take whatever advice and guidance you get from family and friends uh, 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 with caution, but use that entrepreneurial drive to go and find out the support in your local area. There's a huge array of support, and yes, I'm speaking from a UK perspective at this point, and hopefully your podcast has a global appeal.
Yeah.
So from a UK perspective, there's business innovation centres. There's often
Mhm.
support in libraries. Your local council will have something that will get you underway. There are independent training providers. Be careful of those because sometimes they will ask for money, and if you are rigorous with your search, you can often find free support in order to unpack your ideas, build that resilience, build that confidence. Eventbrite is a good place to look and see.
Mhm.
And I advocate for taking whatever is free, particularly in the early stages, to understand where you sit in your arena and build up your understanding. And then from there, it's taking whatever opportunity there is to
Mhm.
speak to the people who you will think you think are the main recipients or beneficiaries of your service or product, and try and get them to tell you what it is that they're looking for. And the caveat with that is, don't go virtually knocking on a door and saying, "I've got this idea. What do you think about it?" Because you'll either get the yes or no, but
Mhm.
more you're asking, um, uh, uh, identifying the problem or the need that you think your customer segment has, and asking them about their experience. How are they being fulfilled at the moment? What's working? What isn't working? In an ideal world, what would they like? And work out where your product and service sits. And the good news about all of this is it's
Mhm.
all free, and it means that the more you build your understanding of where your idea sits, when it actually comes to fruition, it plugs directly into the shape of the hole that you've identified.
Great answer. Thank you, Paul. And, and Paul, you also spoke about effectuation. So I want to know, what is effectuation and what's your perspective on its role in entrepreneurship?
Lovely. Effectuation is close to my heart. Although I'm still fairly new at it. It's
Yeah.
about 5 years in. Um, and I find that people in the enterprise world fall into two categories: those people who know it very well, or still there's a big chunk of the population who've never heard of it. So, if any of your listeners fall into that category, effectuation is a theory that was created by an Indian professor, Sarah Sarasvathy. She tried to distill what makes a successful entrepreneur successful so that everybody can access that skill set. And then from there, she came up with a framework through which to look at not only your idea, but what is meaningful to you. Where are your values and what are you hoping to achieve, and what are the
Hmm.
resources that you've got it to hand, um, and uh, and then how you can galvanize those resources in order to be impactful and effective. Um, so for me, that is particularly within the postgraduate researcher program
Hmm.
that I run and I built my program on. It's helping them to recognize the huge array of skills and knowledge that we all have, and also effectuation encourages you to not think to the future as causal thinking
Hmm.
is when I get to when I've completed this qualification, when I've got this money, when I've got that network, forget that. Who are you? What are you? What are your resources now? And what can you do with that? So very much the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
And it boils down to a similarity to the television program Ready Steady Cook. I don't know whether you've ever come across that. Ready Steady Cook. I still I think it's still available. It's certainly still on YouTube, so you can look it up. It's a television program where members of the public would turn up to the studio with a carrier bag full of hidden ingredients that were either things that they'd seen in the shop but didn't know what to do with, things that they eat regularly but are bored with what they can do with it, or something that's been sitting at the back of a cupboard that they're just unsure what to do with. And they present this carrier bag to these chefs, and then the chef has to make a three-course meal out of the ingredients that are presented. And
Quite
it's
interesting. Yeah.
and it's giving the people on my program the recognition that they've got this bag of ingredients, but the bag of ingredients is their discipline, their research, but also their interest in the plight of homeless people, their love of stamp collecting, and their concern about their grandparent with failing eyesight. And you push all that together and use that as a resource. And so you mush all that together and also put you in a room with other disciplines and other researchers, and you could perhaps come up with something that is utilizing your research skills in order to work out how you lobby for a new set of postage stamps that recognize the plight of homeless people or people with diminishing eyesight. So it's using all of that resource, all of your skills in a very different way, and possibly you could come up with a community interest company that supports blind homeless people, or whatever it may be. So it's just thinking about who you are, what you are, what's important to you, what what are your values, but where is your knowledge?
It's quite interesting because what you're focusing on internal resources like discipline and what we have currently. So it doesn't stop the entrepreneur to get started. I think you
Yes,
help them to get started. I think that's really, really key because I think they
yes.
might be yeah, sorry, go on.
And that's that entrepreneurial mindset of,
Yeah.
well, I can't do that because I haven't got the money
Mm,
or the knowledge, or but you do know something, and you possibly can identify where there's a gap that needs to be fulfilled, and
mhm.
you may have a unique take on that. And all of this costs nothing.
Yeah, sure. And going back to your the cooking example that you mentioned, what if we cook something which is like horrible in taste? So what happens after that?
Ah, right. So well, this is the example that I use in my session.
Hmm.
Imagine you open up your cupboard and all you have is bananas, garlic, and onions,
Ah.
and and that's what you've got to eat for your tea. And you think, well, I can cook this in two different ways. I can mix it up and boil it up and see what happens, or I can chop it and put it in the oven and see what happens. And when
Hmm.
you look at the boiled banana, garlic, and onions, it's awful. And you think, well, I would never do that again. So you've learned something. You've learned something along the way that those component parts don't work in that way together. And so
Hmm.
that's useful knowledge. So it's recognizing that failure is also an important tool along the way. Whereas when you look at how you have the mix in the oven, you found it's caramelized, it's changed its consistency, it's got a sweeter, interesting flavor, and no, possibly you wouldn't use that as your main meal another time. You'd maybe
Mm-hmm.
use it as a side dish to a salad, but you've learned that with these three components, and
Mm-hmm.
you've tried two different approaches. You've learned from the failure of one of not to combine them again, but you've also learned that combining them in this way gives them a different consistency.
No, I love that. And I think that basically links to, as an entrepreneur, it links to experimenting. So when you're an entrepreneur, you experiment with different ideas, different product features to get that feedback early on
Yes,
as you're starting
yes,
that journey. So that's the
exactly that. Yes, and learning what are the resources that you have, and how you can
hmm
combine those in different ways. Like I said, your your love of stamp collecting and your
hmm
interest in homeless people, you put those two together in a very different way.
amazing. Thank you, Paul. Now I want to know more about pop culture and entrepreneurship. So what inspired you to combine pop culture and entrepreneurial education?
Well, I think in the interest of transparency, I should declare myself as a complete geek nerd. Um, cut me and I bleed Star Trek and Doctor Who. There's 60s child. It spoke to me then. It still speaks to me now. Um, and of course, these days it's perfectly okay to say that that's who you are. When I was young, you used to get beaten up. Um, but I was in a training session for PhD students called Survival Skills in Lecturing, and it was for PhD students who find themselves in front of a class of undergraduates to support their supervisor.
hmm
And I thought, I do know what I'm doing, but it'll be interesting to hear what the new people are being taught to see if I'm missing anything. And and rather than go along and just observe, I decided to join in and do the full day session with them as well. And yes, I did learn something to my value. It talked about incorporating QR codes and incorporating bits of your own video, and I hadn't done
hmm
too much of that at that point. And then at the end of the session, we were all asked to do what's called a micro teach. And
hmm
if you or any of your listeners have ever done a teaching or training qualification, part of the assessment is often to um, take your theme and deliver a training session in 3 or 5 minutes. And
hmm
what you're doing is, you're, rather than demonstrating the theme, you're demonstrating the process that you're taking your students through. And because I've done plenty of training and teaching qualifications, I've done plenty of micro teachers, and I know that you don't have to do your real theme
hmm
because you're demonstrating the process, not your knowledge. And so I chose to do Star Trek because I like Star Trek, as I said.
hmm
And in Star Trek, there is something called IDIC, which is infinite diversity, infinite combinations. It's
Okay.
a Vulcan ethnology. I know it's not real, and really, it's what Star Trek was about back in the '60s. It equates to equality and diversity,
hmm
and I was going to do a little session about IDIC, but I started off with um, uh, we're going to talk about IDIC. Does anybody in the room have any idea what those letters could stand for? And this guy at the back said, yes, I know what that is. That's Star Trek. That's infinite diversity, infinite combinations. And then at the end of my 5 minute micro teach, the PhD student came out to the crowd and came up to me and said, I can't believe I didn't recognize that. And I said, well, it's a different context. And he said, no, 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 I know Star Trek. I should have recognized that. So I went home to my wife and said, I've got a way of getting Star Trek people to out themselves even when they don't want to. And that made me think about the people that I know who like this sort of thing are often
hmm
smart, nice people, and not the way media portrays us as living at home with our parents with egg stains on our jumper. And then then I was at the Freshers Fair, and I was thinking about this the array of student societies, and we have a Doctor Who society and a manga society,
Mm-hmm.
and an avocado society, and a Disney society, and a Star Wars society, and all these sorts of things, and that's sort of added into my knowledge. So this is very entrepreneurial work, because it's identifying the resources that are available to me. And then the final icing on the cake was Natasha from Low Carbon Materials, the group who from Durham University, who took part in the Earthshot Prize. She came to give a talk for us, and during her talk, she said that she'd never thought of herself as entrepreneurial, and now she is one of Forbes 30 under 30. She's a female entrepreneur in a construction environment, and there isn't very many females in that environment. They're changing the world of construction. They're changing the
Mm-hmm.
world for better. They've been on the Earthshot Prize, and you put those three together, and you think the people who come to us, they all see and recognize the word enterprise, startup, or entrepreneurial. And even if they're just coming for to find out more about it, the
Mm-hmm.
words have still spoken to them. What about the people who would never come? What about the people who see those words and think, well, that's not for me because I don't want to set up my own business?
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones I want to reach. They're the interesting ones. And imagine a room where you've got people who see themselves as entrepreneurs and people who don't see themselves as entrepreneurs, and the two different mindsets. And if you put those together, what might you get? So that's where it all comes from. And
Fascinating.
then I
Yeah.
thought, how do you get these people in the room? Well, you leverage somebody's love of pop culture. And so we started with Doctor Who because that's what I know. Um, and and the pop culture entrepreneurial sessions have to be true to the pop culture icon. So if well, let me put the question to you: Do
Okay.
you is there a pop culture icon of yours that you love? Are you Doctor Who, Harry Potter,
Mm,
Marvel, Game of Thrones, anything like that?
I mean, I went to Durham University, right? So I have to be Harry Potter, I would say.
Perfect. Well, I did run a Harry Potter one as well. Um, So if I'm leveraging your love of Harry Potter, it can't be a few puns and pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You Because you've come because it's Harry Potter, not because it's entrepreneurial. So if you came and it was just a few puns and pictures, you would feel cheated. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to feel though you've been immersed in the world the universe that you love, and that's what I do. But I set a challenge that is
Mm-hmm.
fixed in your universe, but also reflects the real universe. So for Harry Potter, I'll, I'll speak your language. Um, it was the Ministry of Magic have been monitoring the Muggle world through the Department of Muggle Intervention, and they've seen a BBC News article about plastics in the ocean, and they think that this is a Death Eater plot to create chaos in the Muggle world to make it easier for them to intervene.
Mm-hmm.
You receive a howler from them because it's urgent, uh, and you are sent off in your teams to work out what's happening, to work out who is doing this. Is
Mm-hmm.
it deputies as thought? Um, Come up with a way of stopping it and report back. So that's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with Harry Potter, you can't just wave your wand because it's the Muggle world, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do that because the Ministry of Magic will come down on you like a ton of bricks. So the people in the room. Oh, so the Doctor Who version was something similar. It was the Doctor has seen a BBC News article about plastics in the ocean. He thinks it's an Auton plot. So for those of you who don't know, the Autons are the baddies who can manipulate plastics and make mannequins come to life and kill people. And he thinks it's the Auton plot as well. So same things, go off and find out what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the uh, the attendees do their research. I teach them pitching skills. I teach them research skills. I teach them that entrepreneurial method of working out where you think the solution is, who are the protagonists, who are the
Yeah.
people who are going to get benefit from your intervention, and then report back. Now,
Hmm.
I don't mind the degree in which the attendees reflect the real world. So your solution can be completely couched in the world of Harry Potter. It could be almost another Harry Potter book or movie. That's fine. Or Doctor Who
Hmm.
episode. You could go 50-50 and say, this is the Harry Potter universe and the solution that I've come up with. But just take a moment here, Paul. I know what you're trying to do. The plastics in the ocean is a real thing, and we should also recognize this at the end of our little presentation.
Hmm.
Or you could go completely the other way and say, I see what you're trying to do, Paul, but um, we shouldn't be flippant about plastics in the ocean. And they can do a few puns and pictures about Harry Potter, but they can talk realistically about how important it is. But part of that journey is um, not only this
Hmm.
recognizing how important these themes are, but I can demonstrate to you that your love of Harry Potter, Star Wars, Doctor Who is useful to you in a way that you had never thought of. And part of the end result is,
Hmm.
if I can demonstrate to you that your love of Harry Potter is useful, then what else do you know that is also useful that you have dismissed? And I have a small example. I know uh, an audio podcast, but here's a
That will
book.
be on YouTube as well,
Well, okay,
with
so
video. Yeah.
here's a book. You can't really see it, but it's a Star Wars and Conflict Resolution. There are alternatives to fighting by Ebner and Reynolds. So
Hmm.
these, so there's a whole range of books. The genre is known as the science of fiction, and there's books such as the psychology of Harry Potter, the
Hmm.
science of Doctor Who, the marketing of Star Wars, and these are written by experts and academics in their own discipline, leveraging pop culture in a similar way that I've done to possibly get more people interested in their discipline, to be published and so earn money out of it,
Hmm.
or alternatively to add it to their publications list, so have more academic recognition through it. So their love of these icons is
Yeah.
useful, is used in a way that they'd never thought of. I also, wherever possible, get guest judges to come in at the end to uh, assess with a small a, or give feedback on the presentations. And the
Hmm.
people that I get in are people who have um, used their love of the same pop icon to create a business out of it. So for the Star Wars one, um, there's a guy called Luke Daly in
Hmm.
our local area who is a Star Wars fan, and he creates and sells um, uh, prop movie prop items for Star Wars, Mandalorian, and such like to cosplayers, but
Hmm.
also to the TV and film theatre, TV and film environment. And then a guy who is a cosplayer, has all the costumes, and he is a huge influencer on Instagram and TikTok, and has
Hmm.
made a career out of that, but also uses it to as a charitable opportunity to collect money to give to local charities. So these are people whose full-time job
Hmm.
is Star Wars, or their full-time job is Doctor Who, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So, it's demonstrating that your knowledge of something that you think is frippery and fun, if it speaks to you and you love it and you're passionate about it, you can make that into your career. You can use that as a lens through which to look at things.
Hmm.
You can use that to publish a book, and all of that is entrepreneurial. And so the people who come out of it hopefully have a very different view of what it means to be entrepreneurial.
Amazing, Paul. So could you maybe share a practical example on how franchises like Harry Potter, Doctor Who, or Star Trek can help develop a growth mindset as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, certainly. So, um, well, At Durham, what we want to do is not only help people to be entrepreneurial, but also
Mm-hmm.
to have a positive impact in the world, which is why the challenges are an analogy for a real world problem. So
Mm-hmm.
for Doctor Who and Harry Potter, it was a little easier because they come to London, Canada, Hong Kong, wherever occasionally, where Star Wars never does. And so, so the challenge for Star Wars was set on the planet Hoth, which is the ice planet, and was all about climate change and species extinction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, what it does is it helps you um, to think about things in a very different way, which is entrepreneurial. It helps you to recognize what are the resources that you've got to hand, and here is a resource that you would have
Mm-hmm.
overlooked. That's entrepreneurial. It's helping you to realize that you can make a difference and you have the strength and the ability to do that. That's entrepreneurial. And
Mm-hmm.
here's people who've already demonstrated that there is a path that has been hidden to you of using this knowledge in a way that can generate income. And that's
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial.
Very, very cool, Paul. Thank you. And let's dive deep into startups now.
Yes.
So I have a good question for you. What's the difference between a good startup and a great startup, according to your role in Venture Lab?
um, uh, Commitment, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are successful are the ones who keep coming back and keep coming for advice and guidance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the people who come back to tell us when they've had a success, as well as when they've hit a hurdle, because the success can equally change the path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the ones who recognize that uh, you need to be able to pivot, change, move with the punches, and not be so wed to your idea that that you're unwilling to change. I have a great example for you.
All
Uh,
right.
we have there's a now very successful graduate called Yuru.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure
She's one
she
of her
won't mind me.
friends.
Well, so you're on board. Uh, Euro first came to me with an idea about, I think it was me, or at least us, for sleep pods in Durham University for students, and obviously did some research about that, and then realised that either that wasn't a going concern or didn't suit her at that time. And then she came back with another idea, which was recognizing that some students needed access to a variety of formal clothes for student events. And this was expensive and costly and possibly not good for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And came up with a way of students having access to hired clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and got so far with that and decided not, and then came back to us with her now idea, which is thinking about um, the cultural roots a, of a family's uh, tastes and flavors and food,
Mm-hmm.
and how that has value from an economic perspective for a family, but also is broadcasting an equitable equality and diversity, understanding new cultures sort of manner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very different approach and very successful. Um, and so she's a great example of, here's an idea, come and have a talk. What do I need to do? Right, I'm going to go off and find that and think about that
Mm-hmm.
and come back and realize, that doesn't quite fit. So rather than think, oh well, that's done, she has a think and then comes back and right, I've parked that for the moment, but I'm currently thinking about this. I know from our last conversation that these are the things that I should be doing, and I've done those, but now what? So, and gets the advice and guidance, does the next due diligence sort of work, realizes for herself that
Mm-hmm.
this isn't where she wants to be or where the direction is. And there's a message of, for us, the students and graduates, that they're in charge. It's important that they recognize that.
Yeah.
And she, at the point where she said, all right, I'm now going to step away from that and forgive myself for stepping away from that and I have the power and the strength to step away from that. And nobody can
Mhm.
tell me that it's wrong to step away from that, or nobody can tell me that it's wrong to continue with that because I'm in charge. And she did all of that and thought, yes, right, that isn't right. I'm stepping away from that.
Mhm.
And then thought, right, this is my idea, all the stuff that I've learned and using my resources and my knowledge, and this is what I've come up with, and this is the one that's working, and continues and continues and checks and continues, and pivoted from uh, um, uh, business to customer to business to business.
Mhm.
And that's,
That's again boils down to what you said at the start, experimenting. She experimented with one business idea. She learned, she failed, probably she didn't understand the market, but she kept moving forward. So I think it's
yes,
amazing.
yes, and keeps coming back. And
Yeah, definitely.
it's that resilience, it's that confidence, it's that
Mm,
using the resources that are available to you, and just having the conversation and just talking about it and talking to people and
mm,
understanding, getting different perspectives and being willing to pivot and change and tweak and tailor and sculpture it until it is right.
mm. And what's your advice on how can someone build this resilient muscle?
uh, that's a big question. So, um, I think, but it's that. I think the trick to that really is um, coming up with what you think is a great idea, but at the back having a little a little anchor or tie. If you can imagine that your initial idea is a kite, and you've launched your kite, and it's sort of in the wind and it's blowing nicely, and all the time you're adding extra ribbons to your kite. But
Mhm,
then you get to a point where you think, actually, this isn't the kite for me. I don't like the color, or I don't like the shape of my kite. Being willing to cut that rope and let that kite go, and that's the strength really. That's where the resilience comes from, because you have enough belief in your idea to work on it and be confident and push it
mhm,
and check it all the time, but you're not so married to it that
mhm,
you're unwilling to let go of the kite because
mhm,
it's lost the wind, lost the impact. And here's a bigger kite, a better kite, a different shaped kite that's going to catch the wind more,
mhm,
and you're going to hang on to that one for a little while until you realise that the wind's dropping out of that one, and then move on. It's that willingness to move with it, and not allow yourself to be so convinced that your idea is right that
mhm,
you're going down a road that ultimately will lead to a dead end. It's
mhm.
because you haven't been willing to change and learn and understand, and that's
Amazing.
that's where
Yeah,
the resilience is.
clearly explained. And Paul, what strategies have you seen, because you consult a lot of startups, what strategies have been most effective in growing a startup?
Um, I think the it's that resilience, that willingness to 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 keep coming back.
Mhm,
Um, the and this is quite a difficult one. The willingness to
mhm,
talk about your idea. Um, Often people are very frightened to talk about their idea in case somebody steals it.
mhm,
Doesn't really happen, um, because nobody has the passion for your idea that you have. Um, and if somebody's looking to steal your idea, then you know it's a good one. And and if your idea is a good one, you should never be standing still. They should always be in your rearview mirror trying to catch you up because you're
mm,
20 steps ahead of them. And you learn what's next and what's needed in your environment by talking to people. And if you're closeted, then you're never going to understand what's really needed, what's what's the macro environment, how
mhm,
that's impinging on your idea, what is the public's perception of this environment, these sorts of
mhm.
ideas, this service. And if you're too shut off, you'll never hear that. Um, and then the other aspect is not only utilizing the resources that are available to you, but constantly looking for what else is out there that can support you on your journey.
Great. Thank you, Paul. And last question before we wrap up. So, what fundamental questions entrepreneurs should ask themselves before starting a startup?
Why you? Why now?
Mm-hmm.
And also, who are the people that you're hoping to help, support,
Mm-hmm.
or attract? Um, and do you fully understand what they need and what they're doing currently?
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. A great answer, and it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much for
I've
joining us.
Sorry about the dropouts. Hope that doesn't cause you too much editing heartache.
No, no, all good. So, for all our listeners, I will link Paul's social media handles and LinkedIn profile in the show notes so you can follow him. And make sure you follow the show and leave us a review because that will help me get more interesting guests like Paul on the show. So, thank you once again to all our listeners. And thank you, Paul, once again for joining us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Paul.